Our keynote is coming up next. So his name is Matt Britton. He came in from New York, and he has 2 decades of experience with big brands, and millennial marketing is his specialty. And he has the number 1 best-selling book. It's called Youth Nation. And right now he is the CEO of a marketing intel platform called Suzy. So please help us welcome Matt Britton.
Thank you. Thank you very much. You guys hear me okay? Are there any millennials in the room? Who's a millennial? Wow, super young audience. You guys actually aren't even that young anymore. The youngest millennial is actually 21 years old. So the millennial generation, which was the disruptive generation, which is the generation that everyone's talking about, you hear on newscasts all the time, and I'll explain why in a second, is no longer the de facto new disruptive generation. It's Gen Z. But in their wake, the impact of millennials will be here forever. Millennials have forever changed the world. And I'm often asked, why millennials? Why are millennials such a big word? Why is it such a big impact on marketing, advertising, society? And the answer is pretty simple. Millennials were the first generation ever to grow up with the internet in the household. So think about that. I'm a Gen Xer. When I grew up, if I went to do research, I had to go to Encyclopedia Britannica, right? I actually had to pick up the phone and talk to people. The new generation of millennials were the first ones that had the internet at their disposal during the very formative years. And because of that, their brains are wired differently. And the one thing that fascinates me is that millennials still aren't in the C-suite yet. Many major companies have board of directors full of old white men. I love old white men. My dad's an old white man. I'm going to be an old white man one day. But the reality is that these companies have legacy thinking, right? They grew up tuning into must-see TV on Thursday night. They have a way of thinking that isn't the way of the millennials. And many companies, despite the fact they talk about Mark Zuckerberg as a god or Evan Spiegel, the founder of Snapchat, the 30-year-olds in their organization, they're 7 floors below at major companies, and they don't have a voice. Regardless of their gender, regardless of their ethnicity. And since they don't have a voice, these companies are acting with blinders on, and that's why they get disrupted. And that's why a Toys R Us goes out of business. And that's why so many companies in so many big industries, maybe some companies in this room, won't be around because they aren't listening to the younger people. I actually think major organizations should have a shadow board, a board of directors of 25, 30-year-olds that actually the board of directors has to report to. And they could say, why does our printer serve those whole things on the side that we have to peel off? Why do the people running this company have to call me to ask why the 12 is blinking on their VCR? I think that the companies really need to embrace young people in their organization. They need to give them a voice because they're the ones that are living the world that we're going to be living in moving forward. And too many companies are operating in a 1995 world. So what I'm going to be talking about today is those legacies that millennials have left on society. Because as Gen Z is ushered in, again, the impact that millennials have is indistinguishable, and it's not actually going anywhere moving forward. So I'm going to go through 7 or 8 big legacies. I talk extremely fast, but I'm not just going to talk about the legacy, the change that they had, but I'm going to talk about the implications on society and the implications on your business and what do you guys need to do moving forward. I have my Twitter handle on every single slide. If you have any questions, feel free to tweet it either now or after the fact. I'll make sure I can answer everything. And if we have time for Q&A, I'll do that at the end. So, sound good, everyone? I'm just going to take a drink of water before we dive in. Okay. So when we were born, or at least when I was born, being a Gen Xer, I stared into my mother's loving eyes. But this generation, they stare into a phone because their mom actually wants to capture that moment the second they're bored. And of course, when they're 3 or 4 years old, they're dressing better than any of us in this room, becoming social media experts and gurus. And by the time they're 11 and 12 years old, they're having group status meetings as they share your documentation in the cloud, right? This is not the world that we grew up in. And again, understanding this generation is paramount. And perhaps the number one legacy that millennials are leaving on this world is the status update is the new status symbol. The status update is the new status symbol. In the 80s, 90s, and early 2000s, people would define who they were by the cars, houses, watches, and sneakers they adorn. It was the brands that showcased to society what they were about. There's an ad from Oldsmobile in 1997 that actually lays out specifically, this is the status symbol. This could actually make you be seen as somebody that's wealthy or is elite in your actual cul-de-sac. When you're driving your Lexus, right, listening to Shania Twain coming back from Target, you feel like that you own the neighborhood, right? That was sort of the Gen X MO, and it was the way that they actually defined who they were. If you think about it, before Instagram was created, if you climbed to the top of a mountain, or you actually sat courtside at a basketball game, or even didn't sit courtside but zoomed up really quickly and pretending like you were there, which you're not fooling anyone, you actually couldn't share that with anybody except for who was right in front of you. Right? Experiences could not be shared at scale. If you had a photo album, the only people who could see those experiences were the people who were right in front of you. But now, with Instagram, with Facebook, with all these platforms, experiences could be shared at scale. And since experiences are so much more powerful at defining your personal brand, now what you give as your status update, which is your experiences, what you're doing versus what you have, is now the de facto way that people are building their personas. And that's super important because your status, how you're looked at by society, impacts the relationships you get, right? The jobs that you get. If you're interviewing for a job, someone's probably going to go to your social media platform. They're going to want to see what you're posting. And if you look to be a worldly person, if you look to be an adventurous or brave person, that impacts how you're perceived. The same way you having a Rolex or a BMW or a Porsche, right, impacted how you perceive in yesteryear, which is creating a massive trend in society and business that I talk about in my book, Youth Nation, called DIFTY, that stands for Did It for the Instagram. Experiences are so impactful at defining how one is viewed by society that people are pursuing them now, not only so much to enjoy them, but to prove that they were there. And it's not only kids, it's parents who are filming their kid's piano recital. Instead of looking at it with their own two eyes in high def, they're looking at it through a phone because they actually want to prove that their kid could be the next Billy Joel, right? So DIFTY is impacting the way that people spending their time and their money. If they can't share it, if it can't build their brand, they are far less likely to pursue it, which is why no company is safe. Whether you have a product, whether you have a service, you need to be experience driven. Because if you're not going to give a consumer something to share, if you're not going to give them something that they're going to want to talk about, well, then you're going to largely be invisible. Going back to Toys R Us, I often think, and it's always easy to look at a business that filed bankruptcy, so I'm not, and they had their own realities, but why wasn't there a play center? Why wasn't there something that their parents could take a picture of their kids in Toys R Us, right? Or a daycare center in Toys R Us where it's an experience that they could talk about. Instead, it was actually just the products. And because that shareability wasn't there, even the Apple Store now has a kids area where they can actually go and play with their devices, right? Not having that experience had, in my impact, a far more negative impact than what everything that happened with retail itself. This is Mission Peak in Fremont, California. Has anybody in here been to Mission Peak? No. Okay. Well, Mission Peak's been around for a very, very long time because it's a mountain, okay? But in the last 2 to 3 years, Mission Peak has been plagued by overcrowding, lack of parking, pollution, complaints from local residents. Why? Because Mission Peak, while it seems like these three women climbed to the top of Mount Everest, it's just a 12-minute, fairly easy hike up a mountain. Mission Peak is also located next to 2 major highways, so you don't really need to drive very far to get there. And most importantly, at the top of Mission Peak, there's a pole that people can climb up to take the perfect selfie, right? Now, all of a sudden, everybody's outdoorsy, everybody's rugged, everybody's adventurous, because they take this picture and you look like these people have been hiking for days. But the reality is they haven't. But they know that people are going to look at them and say, I need to get out. I need to be doing these things. Because as we all know, we all judge our own lives against everybody else's highlight reels. And the highlight reels of people like this is helping them define who they are and how they're seen by society. People in Russia are renting grounded private jets to take Instagram photos. This is real. I didn't make this up. These private jets do not leave the runway. People are taking pictures on them, again, to be able to portray to society that they have the experience of actually flying a private plane. There's a place in New York City called Blacktop. They sell $25 sundaes. There are lines around the corner to be able to eat these sundaes. They taste just as good as any other sundae. I took my 12-year-old daughter there. I tried to bite into the one on the right before she took a picture. I almost lost my head. Okay? Because for the young generation, the ability to take a picture of this sundae and share it, the experience of the actual sundae and what you're about to eat means more than actually eating the sundae itself. She was more excited to take a picture of the sundae than to eat the sundae. There was 2-hour lines. I hired a TaskRabbit because I had no interest in waiting. It actually worked. So I would recommend that if your kids actually ever ask you to go to this place or if you want to go there. But again, this company is exploding now because they get it. They get it's not just about selling a sundae. It's actually about the experience and making people talk about it. This is the Museum of Ice Cream. Museum of Ice Cream is now in New York City, San Francisco, Los Angeles, and Miami. When they sell tickets, tickets sell out instantly. Now, the Museum of Ice Cream isn't a typical museum that you might think is a museum. You don't go there to learn about how the cows are herded in and the pasteurization of ice cream or anything like that. There are 12 rooms that people can go to. And when you go into them, you could take an amazing selfie, an amazing picture like the sprinkle room that people can take pictures of. And kids want to go here. Not just kids, teenagers, I want to go there, right? And that's why I think a place like this is so cool to do a conference, because this is a shareable experience, right? You come here, you get the experience of going out in the racetrack. You're going to want to talk about that. People are like, why you were there. You're like, oh, I work with this awesome agency, Drum. Oh, I should check them out. Let me call them, et cetera. That's shareable, right? That's why it's smart to actually have an event here. The Museum of Ice Cream isn't the typical museum. And kids don't want to go to the MoMA, right? Or the Tate Modern, or the Museum of Natural History. They want to go to the Museum of Ice Cream. Because the reality is, they can learn anything that they'd learn at a traditional museum on Google, on the internet. So if they're going to spend their time, their most precious commodity, and actually travel and go somewhere, it's going to be somewhere where they can actually have that experience and get great pictures and share them. And that's why a lot of traditional museums are struggling right now. Now, you can get romantic and you can say, that's terrible. Shouldn't they want to learn? Shouldn't they this? Shouldn't they that? It doesn't matter. We aren't going back. This is the new consumer. This is how they're spending their time. They are staring at their phones. Their phones are not going to be suddenly disappear, and they're not going to not care about Instagram or sharing their personal brand anymore. So traditional museums have to redefine themselves. Restaurants, hotels, any sort of retail outlet, anywhere where you expect somebody to take their time and go to you, it better be shareable, or they're probably not going to want to do it, which is creating a global hospitality renaissance. In Europe, there's an app called GTFO, which stands for Get the Flight Out, which basically shows you the furthest place you can fly on a Friday afternoon for the cheapest amount of money, right? $180 round trip to Colombia, I guess we're going to Colombia. Last second travel is exploding among this generation, and when they land in Colombia, they're not going to look at a photos book, right? They're going to search a location on Instagram and see the most influential people and where they've taken their pictures, and that's where they're going to go. So if you're a hotel and you have an incredible statue in the front that creates a perfect image, you're golden, because people are going to take pictures in front of that, and everyone else is going to show up in front of that, and they probably will stay there. And same with a restaurant. That's how these hospitality companies are winning, is they're creating these shareable moments. The festival and music circuit is exploding, because those experiences, again, allow people to define their personal brands. You talk to Coca-Cola or major beverage brands, and they'll tell you the fastest growing segment of their business is venues for live events. It's not Walmart or Target or traditional retailers, right? Because this is where consumers want to spend their time and their money. Tough Mudder. Anyone here do Tough Mudder? So this allows you to spend $350 to climb through disgusting, dirty water under barbed wire so you can show everyone that you're a goddamn Navy SEAL, okay? Now, who wouldn't want to do this, right? This is the new fitness. Anyone here Bally's Total Fitness is in Chicago? Well, they're now bankrupt. Great company, right? They had great exercise equipment, traditional membership rate, but there was nothing to share about it. Now you have SoulCycle and Barry's Bootcamp and Tough Mudder and Color Run, which is redefining the fitness space around experiences, giving somebody something shareable. Everybody wants to portray that they're this type of person. No matter unhappy that guy being dragged up that side of the wall is, it's definitely worth it if he gets a really good Insta from it. The next is that urbanization will transform the global footprint. Our notion of the American dream growing up in Gen X is get married, move out to the suburbs, white picket fence, 2-car garage, 1.7 children, et cetera, et cetera. But cities are the places where millennials imagine living moving forward. Cities are becoming safer, the schools are becoming better, and in the 24-hour news cycle, the action is going on in the cities. And because of it, the livable boundaries of major cities are being pushed outwards and outwards and outwards. Take Brooklyn, New York, where I live, and real estate prices are up over 120% in the last 10 years, while the neighboring suburbs, they're up 2 to 5%. I was just in Seattle. They can't build fast enough. I was there yesterday. Amazon is hiring more people to work for Amazon in Seattle that actually live in Seattle right now, okay? Wynwood outside of Miami, Oakland outside of San Francisco. The list goes on and on and on. Consumers do not want to leave the cities, which is causing gentrification and is actually flipping the nature of this very nation inside out. The notion of the inner city blue-collar worker is basically gone. This is Washington, D.C. right now. The light blue is primarily the working class. You do not see the light blue in here right now because they are being pushed out to the suburbs. So companies that have major malls and major retail outlets out in what used to be affluent suburban areas are wondering why their business is down, and that's because the millennials actually are staying in cities. This has a massive trickle-down effect on almost any industry that you can think of. Cars, the cost of a car combined with the cost of gas, tolls, parking, insurance makes owning a car actually laughable. Sorry, Porsche, but any car. For most young people growing up. Now, they wouldn't mind jumping into Porsche Uber, right? Because that's what they're doing. They would rather access a car over owning it, because the question I often get is, well, how do these millennials have all this money for all these experiences? Well, they're not buying cars and houses anymore. Right? It's just a shift in where they're spending their time and their money. They're renting places like this on Airbnb, this Flintstone house, because they want to live a mobile lifestyle, right? So, and let's be honest, when they stay in cities, you need Rockefeller money, right? Or Jay-Z, Beyonce money to be able to actually afford a place in a major city. So they can't even afford it. So they need to rent. So the bedrock of savings, right? The mortgage and owning that home, which, as we all know, isn't really the bedrock we once thought it was, right? Because a lot of these kids lived through the 2008 crash. They know that buying the house and the car is no longer the rite of passage that it used to be. It doesn't mean nobody's buying houses. It doesn't mean nobody's moving to the suburbs. But this is a shift that is undeniable. And that's why you see shopping malls starting to have trees growing up through the floors in a lot of markets, because the younger people aren't going out to shopping malls anymore. They don't have the car where they can roll up in their SUV and fill up stuff. They're going, obviously, on Amazon. And this is generating also major upside impact for the service sector. This is Glam Squad. Who's heard of Glam Squad? So Glam Squad is as easy as ordering an Uber. You have a team of stylists or a stylist come and do hair and makeup and blowout for a bunch of women who are going out, or men, who are going out for a night out. For Glam Squad, what a great business model. They no longer have to pay Main Street retail prices, right? They don't have to pay those expensive prices to actually have a physical location. For the consumer, they'd much rather have people come to them. They actually save time and money. There's a company called Handy, which has this cleaning service that comes to your house. And if I were a company like Procter & Gamble or Clorox or Reckitt Benckiser or Unilever that's selling packaged goods, cleaning products, I would buy the company Handy and let them come in as your distribution platform and actually clean people's houses with your products, right? If I were L'Oreal or Maybelline, I would actually buy, or Revlon, I would buy Glam Squad, right? Because now you're having people come into your home, because these people are not walking through the aisles. It used to be in the CPG category. If you went down to Bentonville, Arkansas, or you went to Minneapolis and met with Walmart or Target, and you got a couple more inches or an end cap, your year was made. You actually didn't even need to know about your consumer anymore. Well, those days are done with anymore right now, because these young people, this affluent millennial, isn't going to Walmart and Target the way they used to. You need to build a brand in much different ways, and this is kind of the new way in. It's literally a way in because you're getting into consumers' homes. Who's heard of Rent the Runway? Okay. This concept would have been seen as nutso like 10 years ago, that women would rent high-end, fashionable clothing, right? But the reality is, and this is something I did a little bit of research on, is it used to be before Instagram, and you women in the room can tell me if I'm right or wrong, although I do have some validation, is that if you wore a dress in front of your college friends, well, then that dress was expired in front of your college friends. But you could still wear it in front of your work friends, or you could still wear it in front of your school friends, right? So you had like 4 times that you could wear it until it was kind of expired, at least for 6 to 12 months. But the problem is, if you take a picture on Instagram, it's expired for everybody. So that dress is done. So you spent $1,000 on a dress you could never wear again. With Rent the Runway, you spend $75 on the dress, you wear it, no one needs to know that you don't own it anyway, right? It's their little secret, and you return it the next day. What a great business model. Who needs to afford and pay for this expensive $1,000 Diane von Furstenberg dress, right? When you could pay $75 and save that $925 on a great night out or multiple nights out. Right? And that is really the new model. That's the access over ownership model. So it's not only about cars and houses, it's actually about clothing. And this is transforming the fabric of the global workforce. Growing up, what I was told by my parents is get a job as a lawyer or a doctor, or go work at a big company and work your way at the corporate ladder, right? In the 70s and 80s, the average age of a company on the Fortune 500 was over 60 years old. Now, the average age of a company on the Fortune 500 is less than 10 years old. Companies are simply not around as long anymore, and here's that bottle of water. And as a result, that tried and true fashion of working your way at the corporate ladder isn't there anymore. And what young people need to understand is that they need to be the CEO of themselves. If they actually, and so I ask all the time my parents, are my children screwed? Like, what should I tell them to do? And I tell them very simply, they need to do one of two things. Go deep into an art or deep into a science, right? Go deep into an art. Learn how to come up with ideas. Learn how to write. Learn how to design. Do things that the machines will never do. Or deep into a science. Learn how to operate and code the machines. But don't get a degree in liberal arts, right? Don't walk into work every day and wait for your boss to tell you what to do, because it's a lot cheaper for your boss to tell somebody in Costa Rica or India what to do, right? And with offshoring and outsourcing, that's the future of the world we're in. And people who have those marketable skill sets, those deep skill sets, are able to kind of create the new version of the American dream. WeWork was just valued at $20 billion with a B, started by a group of guys in their late 20s. What WeWork allows me to do is sit across from that guy in the snazzy blue shirt who might be an HR outsource expert, next to a guy sitting to the right of me who may be a coder, next to the guy on the right of me who might be a graphic designer. I have a culture that rivals Google, right? And I can market that skill set to multiple companies at once. I can work out of any WeWork location around the world. WeWork is the largest tenant of the commercial real estate in places like San Francisco and Tel Aviv. They have locations everywhere. So now I am the CEO of myself. I don't have a boss. I'm the boss of myself. And as long as I market my trade or my craft, I can make way more income. And if you go into a WeWork, and maybe a business will start out of it, or maybe I'll just be a full-time free agent for my career. But what many young people are finding is that's way more lucrative, actually way more safe and secure of a path than going to work at a large organization. And we're going to start to see this more and more and more. And companies are following suit, because as millennials are staying in cities, they're taking a step back and saying, maybe the suburban enclave that we moved into for tax concessions doesn't make as many sense anymore. Says MasterCard in Purchase, New York, says Visa in Foster City, says Microsoft, where I just came from, Redmond, Washington, and all those companies, GE in Stamford, Connecticut. We need to create these innovation hubs in Soho or Buckhead, right? The cool areas. And then what starts to happen is all the young employees say, can I work out of the innovation hub today? And then, can I work there for a week? Can I just work out of there? Because I don't want to go to the suburbs anymore. So more and more companies are seeing that they actually need to move to these urban hubs to be close to millennial talent, or else they're really going to be struggling recruiting people. Next is the barbell economy is here to stay. There are two opportunities for business right now. On the luxury side, Porsche, great example, and on the value side. But if you're in the middle, you're in a big, big world of trouble to actually get out of. You know, the value side, there's Dollar Tree, Dollar Store, Dollar General, right? There's Vizio that makes flat screens for $199. These companies are winning through supply chain innovation, giving people the best possible product for the lowest possible price. You know, people in a lot of the areas of this country don't have the luxury to buy Aunt Jemima maple syrup. They just want to buy store brand maple syrup, or Scott toilet paper to pay an extra $1. They actually can't afford it. One of the slides I just skipped over, which is fascinating to me, is that the 8 richest men control as much wealth as the poorest 50% of people on the planet. So this is happening obviously at a macro level. On a micro level, more micro level here in the United States, 0.1% of the population controls nearly 25% of the wealth. So the middle is gone. And companies that can win on the value side are understanding that private label's coming in. And if I'm Tide, I'm kind of in the middle, right? Because there's private label Walmart brand detergent, and then there's Method organic detergent. The wealthy people don't want to bring the harmful toxins in their home. They're going to buy the Method brand detergent. And then the value side of the equation, they're going to buy store brand because it's all the same stuff anyway, right? And Tide's sitting in the middle, right? So CPGs really need to say, which way are we going to go? And a lot of them are acquiring those types of companies, but many of them are staying in the middle. And on the luxury side, you have JetSmarter, where you can pay $15,000 to get in private jets that actually do take off the runway, right? Or there's Amman Resorts that is $2,000 a night for resorts they're building all around the world. Or the iPhone, which is $1,000, right? So this is the luxury side of the equation, but who's getting hurt? The Gap, right? They're in the middle. Why? Well, the value side's buying Lee jeans for $25, right? The luxury side's buying J brand or AG jeans for $250, and nobody's buying $100 jeans. And no matter what category you're in, so many businesses are selling the equivalent of $100 jeans, which is why Delta had Delta One, right? They're going upstream, which is why Spirit Airlines and Ryanair are two of the fastest growing airlines because they're in the value side. They'll strip everything down. You're going to pay for the peanuts. But that's okay because some people don't even care. They just want to get to where they're trying to get to. So it's just something to keep in mind when you go to market in terms of picking sides. There's also another version of the barbell economy, which is like Victoria's Secret, who saw we're disenfranchising our younger shopper young women aren't going to want to buy somewhere bras where their mom buys $50 bras. We're going to get locked out of the market. So they invented Pink, which was their entry-level brand, which happened to be the fastest-growing brand in the history of retail. Cheaper, targeting towards the younger generation, actually bring them into the franchise, right? If I were Porsche, I would definitely come up with a different, less expensive brand that people would know by Porsche, but not use the Porsche brand, that actually targets with the same brand ethos the younger generation, actually bring them into the fold and work them upstream, much like Toyota does, to get people in and then shift them over to Lexus, because I think younger people, it's going to start to get to a point where the brand loses relevance because nobody they know has it. It's something to keep in mind. Amazon, I mean, what can I say? I mean, I had this slide here and it actually becomes more and more real every day, but I think they're going to be closer to a $2 trillion company than a $1 trillion company by the end of this year, even though right now they're not even worth $1 trillion yet. For this young generation that is staying in cities, buying online is obviously a de facto, and when they live in doorman buildings, they cannot actually have enough space because the walls it actually looks like my apartment, unfortunately. The walls of the lobby are stacked and they're all coming from Amazon. Right? And no matter what the category is. And that puts tremendous pressure on low involvement categories. As I mentioned earlier, if you went in Bentonville, Arkansas, and you sold a couple inches and you got an end cap, you'd actually be able to sell your own product. But now Walmart's coming in and launching their own private label. Right? So if you're French's Mustard and then you have a private label mustard brand that's owned by Walmart, and what I find so fascinating with a lot of CPGs and manufacturers of packaged goods is like, we don't want to piss off Walmart by going online. Yet Walmart's actually creating their own products and going against you. So who's going to win in the end there? And private label is taking off for that reason, because in a barbell economy, consumers actually don't care as much. And all these companies that we all know well, really have to figure out how they're going to reinvent themselves in a world where more and more people are buying everything online. And at the same time, consumers do not care about brands the way they used to. This is a report that fascinates me. It's the top 10 most valuable brands, and almost every brand on that list is a utility brand. What you don't see is Coke or Pepsi or Hershey's, right? You don't see Ford or GM or brands that kind of we grew up knowing, or even Nike, right? The tried and true brands. Why? What all these brands do is they act as a utility for the consumer. They figure out where they can fit in a consumer's life to make their life easier. They don't sell a brand promise like this is going to make you look cooler, right? Because consumers don't care as much anymore. They care about actually what a brand can do for them. And I think you're going to see this continue and continue and continue. It doesn't mean branding is over. It doesn't mean branding doesn't matter anymore. But what it does mean is that if you are a brand, you have to figure out. So that's why you see Under Armour buying a company like MapMyFitness, right? They're buying an app. They sell physical products, but they're buying an app. Why? MapMyFitness allows you to track your exercise routine, which actually allows you to actually be more fit, which is utility for consumers, and Under Armour is bringing it to you. Their brand's connected to it. So you're going to see more and more companies buying these services and applications so they can all be a little bit more like the companies on this list, because these are the companies that are winning because they are focusing on what consumers actually really care about. And this is obviously forcing a whole new wave of innovations. I'm going to skip around here based upon time. Has anyone heard of Brandless? So Brandless is a company that just raised $50 million. Talked about Aunt Jemima's maple syrup for some odd reason, and now it's on the slide. But so what Brandless is actually doing is they're selling a variety of household products all for $3. And when their promise to consumers is, you don't care about the brand. We're going to give you the best possible ingredients for every product, and we are not going to be advertising it at all. And this company is doing incredibly well. So actually, what does that say for companies that spend billions and billions and billions of dollars on building their brand equity? What does Aunt Jemima have to say if people are going to spend $3 on a no-brand maple syrup? Because ultimately, they just care about the ingredients in the product. That's actually really what they care about right now. And everybody is distribution, right? So it kind of becomes the lowest common denominator. It's about utility. You look at away luggage. It's a $300 or $200 piece of luggage, and they're all designed the same, and they have an iPhone charger built into them. That's utility. They became known for that. JetBlue became known for their airline because they were the first airline to have TVs in the seats, right? Those are utilities that matter. But the brand promises of old, not so much anymore. Going back to like the P&G example, I was in Cincinnati a couple weeks ago, and what I told them is that you should buy a company that makes washing machines. and you have to basically create a whole new ecosystem. Meaning, if I were them, think about it. Millennials are staying in cities, right? They don't need big washing machines. They need small ones. If I were P&G, I'd buy Westinghouse or a defunct washing machine company. I'd make super small washing machines that fit in people's drawers, and they only accept Tide Pods. And that's it. And then my customer wouldn't be Walmart. It would actually be the companies that make the apartment buildings, relate it, and the big real estate developers. I would sell my washing machines to them, have them installed, and there's your distribution strategy, right? You're buying the hardware and the software. That's the way that these new companies actually have to think, where they're thinking about the ecosystem and how they're going to have a utilitarian impact on consumers versus just trying to push their unique brand proposition. And Alexa, and it's not just Alexa, it's the Google Home devices that you guys just gave out. Voice is becoming, it's going to make typing look like hieroglyphics soon. I got into an argument, I was very polite, but with a school teacher a couple of years ago, and I said, why are they teaching handwriting? It makes no sense. We're not going to be handwriting anymore. Well, now, I make the argument in 2 to 3 years, typing is going to be a thing of the past. Voice is going to be 99.9% accuracy this year, and it's going to be 100% not too far off. And the way that we enter information into a device is going to be all by voice. We're going to be talking into everything because it saves consumers time. We talk about VR and AR and all this kind of new technology. That stuff is way far away, but voice is close because it's what consumers already do. They already talk. They talk too much, right? So when you talk, it saves time, it's easier, and because of it, it's going to be adopted by consumers. And Amazon is seeing this, going back to the pressure on brands. If you have an Amazon Alexa and you say, Alexa, buy me batteries, Amazon Alexa will say, I will send you Amazon Basics batteries, which is their private label brand. And you say, no, I want Duracell batteries. And Amazon will say, I will send you Amazon Basics batteries. Because what they're betting on is the ease and ubiquity of ordering without even having to pick out your phone trumps the value of a multi-billion-dollar brand. That's utility right there, right? It's so much easier. And is this battery really working that much less than the Duracell battery? Maybe not. But then what about the billions of dollars that Duracell's spending every single year on advertising? Right? That's utility. That's understanding what a consumer wants ultimately, which is to save them time and make their lives easier. And that ultimately matters way more than any brand. And I believe the very nature of mobile devices is going to change soon. I think this is going to be what the future of the phone is. I was actually backstage before a keynote about a month ago, and I almost swallowed an AirPod, which would have made me like a robot, I guess. Singularity would have hit. But I think the future is that's how you're going to talk in. And then if you guys haven't seen the movie Her, which came out a couple years ago, I would definitely check it out. This guy falls in love with his phone, which is actually in his ears. It doesn't hurt that this phone has the voice of Scarlett Johansson, but that's besides the point. But I think the visual aid will be contact lenses, where basically I'm looking at everyone in this room, and if they've opted in, I can actually see all your different names and all your titles because you've opted in, and maybe it's tapping into LinkedIn. Or if I'm in a store, I could see how much everything costs. Or if I'm walking down the street, I could see how overpriced that apartment is by looking at it, right? That's the augmented reality. It's reality and virtual reality. It's the middle point of it. And I think that's going to be the future of actually how you see stuff. You'll still have a tablet to watch a movie and these things, but I think the notion that everyone's going to be staring at their phones, an actual phone in their hand, in say 7 years is going to be like yesteryear. And you could say I'm crazy, but if I told you 10 years ago that you'd get into a car without talking to anyone and it would take you somewhere and you'd leave without talking to the driver, you'd say I'm crazy. Or you could talk to somebody in Uganda in high def by hitting a button for free, right? You'd say I'm crazy. And change is only getting faster and faster and faster. So the phone will not be around for that much longer. Obviously, we'll have a personal device, but I actually think this is very prophetic in terms of where we're going to be going. And I think for companies like Google, it's really going to put a lot of kind of pressure on their core search business because whoever owns the last mile, in this case is the physical device, is going to be able to win. So if I say, hey Siri, what's the closest pizza place? Well, Apple can dictate who tells me what the closest pizza place is, right? They have their device in my ears or in my hand, not Google. So in the world of voice, I think a lot of traditional digital brands are going to have pressure on them. And I think that's why the race to get devices into people's homes, which Amazon's doing, or what Google's trying to do, or what Apple has so successfully done, those companies are ultimately going to win because they have the last mile towards the consumer. And lastly, because I want to wrap it up and see if we have any time for any quick questions, the future of the television is a disruption that is basically here. The only reason, there's two reasons why the TV has not completely kind of gone away in the traditional model. And when I say TV going away, it doesn't mean that we're not going to want to sit back on our couch and eat Doritos and drink a beer and watch a football game. That's actually the form factor. I'm saying the TV industrial complex, where like you turn into a show and you watch an advertisement in order to see the content you're looking for. I think that's going away. There's two reasons why it hasn't gone away yet, in the United States at least. One is the National Football League, which is by far the most powerful force in media, the #1 watch program amongst both male and female viewers, and the National Football League has still not went to a pure streaming model like the other sports leagues, right? And two, the form factor of the television has not converged yet. Yes, there's smart TVs, but they're Samsung smart TVs, and Samsung's not a software company, and they have not built an intuitive way. Kids go up to TVs and they try to swipe the TV, right? If you ask a 12-year-old kid what Fox is, they'll tell you it's an animal. If you ask them what ABC is, they'll tell you it's the alphabet. They don't know what a TV network is. They do not tune into TV networks, yet 75% of brand marketing dollars during the upfront are actually going to TV networks, right? And once the TV and the computer become one, the TV essentially becomes a giant iPad hanging on your wall, right? It becomes all one. So Apple TV, I'm sure a lot of you guys in this room have Apple TV. This is kind of what it looks like today. It kind of turns your TV into a giant iPad, except that Apple has not created physical TVs yet, but they're actually starting to sell them this holiday season. So both Apple and Amazon are launching physical devices that you can swipe. Again, turning the TV and the computer to one. And while Apple TV looks like this today, tomorrow it's going to look like this. What you don't see here is TV networks. What you do is people, right? You'll be able to turn into a person as a channel. Because the reality is that Beyonce and Justin Bieber and Kim Kardashian have more reach right now than TV networks do themselves, right? Those people are actually the new distribution brands. And kids, when they go on YouTube, they're searching for Logan Paul, right? They're searching for individuals on their channels. So people are gonna have a channel, shows are gonna have a channel, because why does the show Billions, my personal favorite, need the Showtime network? Well, they don't. They could just distribute directly, direct to consumer, right? And then they get a piece of every stream or advertising, and then the sports leagues. And I think this is the future. And in this world, the consumer is going to have a choice. Do I watch Billions for free and get subjected to advertising, right? Or do I buy it? But in the barbell economy, does that mean the only people who are going to watch TV spots are the value sector? Right? What does that mean for the future of actually television itself? And Joe's Pizza will be able to advertise during the Super Bowl to everybody within 2 miles of its location, right? So that lowers the playing field and kind of democratizes reach amongst brands. And then what do the big brands do who are used to writing $200 million insertion orders to Viacom or News Corp? They're going to really have to rethink things. And some companies are being progressive about programmatic, but it's going to be fascinating to actually see what's happening, which is why content really has become everything. If you look at the trajectory of technology, and I'll wrap with this point, it first started in Silicon Valley, right? Because all the engineers knew how to build all this crazy cool shit, right? No one knew how to do it, right? Then it shifted to New York because people need to figure out how to pay for it. They all want the advertisers, right? So it's Maz Navu. But now it's Hollywood. Now Hollywood is controlling everything. Content is everything. It's drawing the eyeballs. It's drawing business. And whoever has right now, it's whoever has the deepest pockets and the best ecosystems are winning. And I think obviously content becomes huge because it provides utility to consumers. It captures their attention, and it's the best way to actually sell products in this new day and age. So that's all I have for you guys today. Here's my info if you guys have any questions. Hopefully I've provided a lot of value for you guys, and I hope all you guys have a great, safe trip home. Thank you.